Okay, so let's keep the conversation around some of the big stories on our business street for the current week. The U.S. on one hand, talking about Nigeria and American trade relations, increasing business ties, what we should do. Then on the other hand, we have the U.K. authorities also talking about Nigeria. So this is where it is happening. Everyone is interested in Nigeria, what happens in Nigeria, and how we move forward. And agriculture is one of it. So the UK West Africa Agri Transformation Summit is held. Then got a big panel of those who contributed their ideas about how we should move forward in agri transformation. In particular, financing, one of the most difficult parts of getting agri value chain up into industrialization. So this is part of the some of what the panelists says at the just concluded UK West Africa Agri Summit here in Lagos. Let's take a listen to some of the panel's comments.
There is a huge opportunity in terms of the food market, as much as there is a heavy risk in agriculture business. At the moment, it is estimated that we need an investment worth $50 billion to maximize that opportunity in Africa's food industry and agriculture industry in 10 years. What would be your advice on how to tap into the finance of that volume to maximize that opportunity?
The huge opportunity remains an opportunity except there is finance to activate that opportunity. Peculiarities of finance industry with respect to Nigeria, with respect to everywhere when it comes to agriculture, still has that level of fear of the unknown, especially in primary production, which we have we call the black hole, even though a lot of organizations have come in and they are solving the problem of this black hole. I work with NISAL, and part of our responsibilities is to catalyze the flow of finance to fixed value chains. The value chain business, the value chain structure of finance in agriculture seems to be one sure way of getting this done, where we've broken agriculture into the pre-upstream, the upstream, the midstream, and the downstream, capturing the whole segment, the whole gamut of the process. Tapping into this opportunity rests on ability to bring in players along this chain, fusing them together where their accountabilities, if I use the word accountabilities, even though that's still very difficult to achieve now because of the level of education of farmers that we have now. But with training, because it's not just tapping into the opportunity, there are things that need to go in first before you can tap this opportunity. Part of it revolves around training and literacy, bringing people to full capacity on what these potentials are, what the business are doing, the potentials in the business that they're doing. So looking at that, so we see a situation where if we're able to arrange these value chains and bring in the players and lock them in with finance, the finance provider sees a clear path of how my money will come back. The finance provider sees a clear path on the utilization of funds, and then we'll layer credit risk guarantee behind the finance provider because we're a risk sharing facility. We'll put that behind the finance provider. To a large extent, these are the risk methods of attacking production and fitting it into a value chain that solves the supply chain problem of processors, that at the end you have the market, is one sure way of having a go at it.
Now, from a risk perspective, I always hear that agriculture is risky. And agriculture is risky, but so is oil and gas. If you look at the loan portfolio of the banks in Nigeria, the preponderance of non-performing loans today is in oil and gas. It's not in the agricultural sector. So yes, there is risk, but it's how do you manage that risk? And do you have the skills, the capabilities around you to help manage that risk? I think it's all very key. In terms of the opportunity itself, you mentioned some statistics, and yes, there is a huge opportunity. Even if you look at Nigeria in isolation, we have another 70 million people that will be added over the next 10 years. We have to feed these people. It's not sustainable to import food to feed this large number of people. In addition, there are many competencies we have across different value chains that we can leverage to also provide different processed food products or food across the region. But the question then is, how do we wrap around not just finance, because in many ways there's quite a bit of capital that's available. The question is, how do you actually deploy that capital, and how do you wrap around that technical support around the entrepreneurs to ensure that they can actually execute on their plan and actually scale up? And that's very key. And also finding people who are willing to work outside of Lagos and Abuja, because everything we do in agriculture is not in Lagos and Abuja, it's in small towns and cities, and cities. So getting talent to those locations is also very key to actually boost and provide growth within the sector.
Yes, so without repeating some of these things, I think the potential is huge. I think the current market in sub-Saharan is around 340 billion. But the finance remain, as you said, the key issues. But when you survey the banking sectors, most of them are interested in investing, funding agro, but they don't know. So even people working in the banking sectors, they don't have expertise or specialist people in agribusiness. So how can you finance a sector if you don't know how they behave? So try to talk to some of these banks. In my country, there are funding traders, people importing things, but they have no clue about how to finance this. So there is also a need to increase their expertise, the expertise within the finance communities in Africa, and not rely only on the foreign investors to come. So the African countries need to put a proper financing structure together. Why not have an investment fund for agro? The agro sector is well protected in Europe. France, for example, is sharing 23% of that market and feeding 50 European countries. And it's well managed, it's well funded by, sometimes it's controversial, but they are fighting sometimes the EU because France is intervening. So there is that level, limited access, but I think, increasing the expertise in the banking sector may solve some of the issue, having a proper funding, also a partnership across. You have a lot of financing projects moving around in Africa. In my own country, since the president has announced that agro is key for Guinea, every single week I'm having consultants from the world, from all over the world, trying to ship in. We have more than 100 projects in agro in Guinea currently. The World Bank has a project called Enclave, which is around $200 million. But when you look at all these people coming into Africa, consultants, they are coming with tailor-made things, which sometimes doesn't suit us. So I think we need to have a control, have a proper visions. And otherwise, the money sometimes which is coming into Africa will end up into these consultant pockets. In order, it will not go into these entrepreneurs. We have a lot of projects currently. For example, one of them is with the European Union, trying to get the young people interested into agro, youth. And they are trying to elevate, I think there is a target of 7,500, targeting 7,500 young people into agro. And the funding of that is coming from European Union. But, again, there is a lot of buts. So we need to redesign things ourselves. If we do that, and also, even if we have that component in Guinea, I'm talking about Guinea, the business entrepreneurs in Guinea, the informal sector is 80% of the market. I'm sure even in Nigeria, the informal sector is high. Even people, branding themselves are formal, they are informal. And that's the big issues. So you cannot get funding if you are still behaving as an informal businessman. So you need to have a proper balance sheet, you need to have a proper structure in order to get finance.
So I work with CDC, UK government-owned development finance institution, and we've been investing in agriculture for more than 70 years in Africa. So we have plenty of experience of what works and what doesn't work, and at present we are not capital constrained. The constraint is identifying the right investment opportunities. And I think as my colleague referenced, it starts with people in the room, it starts with the entrepreneurs who will shape the right projects for us and who can identify projects that make sense within different value chains, that have strong linkages to the market, whether it's a local market, which is clearly growing strongly, whether it's to an export market, can think about the logistics. There are too many projects which have been standalone ideas and plenty of capital sunk into them and have not done well. So I think the coherence of thinking on the projects needs to come from the entrepreneurs, working with investment partners, and that alone can be a long process. It might be 1 or 2 years of discussion with local fund managers who are here on the ground and can help develop your ideas, and then ultimately support equity investment into your projects, which is sufficiently patient and can take a long-term view. I think for many investees, it's rather naive to think that banks are not interested in your projects, because of course they're not interested if you're presenting very high risk to them. They will only invest in projects that are sufficiently de-risked and have the support of clear plans, have good equity backing, good management, good asset base. So I think the start is with the project and with the relevant equity support to those projects, which in our case is through our local fund managers for the more moderate scale projects, or directly from the UK for substantially larger projects which are going to have a very significant development impact.
If I approach you as a farmer or as a practitioner in the agri space, and I require funding for my project, what are the things, other than a very good book, right, you look out for before you can say, okay, let's do a business?
I guess the first thing is the people in the business, the management in the business, because a business isn't anything without its people. And agriculture is, the value that's created is largely a part of the human resources, the human capital. That isn't of the right quality, then there isn't a business to invest in unless there are changes planned for the future. So, the quality of the people, and sort of talking to what was just being articulated there, the knowledge of the produce that you're creating. If you don't know your business, then you don't know how to manage that correctly. It comes down to people. And then, obviously, you look at the sort of the meso and the macro issues of the market, of what they're trying to sell into. There's no point trying to sell chilies into a market that wants turnips. But the starting point is very much the people. I smile when you say blockchain, because I'm as confused as hell about blockchain. What does it actually really do? People come up with these words, but what is the sustainability? What is it actually doing? I believe in the infrastructure, in the agriculture space, there is need for more data. But that's not blockchain. With more information, with more data, people can understand the risks in an adventure and can make and measure those risks and price that. But where does blockchain fit into that?
That's talking about UK, West Africa, agriculture transformation, financing, value chain, industrialization, and all of that. But let's get, of course, continue the conversation a little bit away from that when we talk about the marketplace, European markets having one of its most nasty sessions so far this week. As we speak, all major European stock markets are in the red, as of course taking a cue overnight from Wall Street. Asia is finishing largely also in negative territory today. So for the Europeans, a big day for elections as we take a look at some of the earnings as well. And of course, the London Stock Exchange trying to step into Africa, looking for more Pan-African company listings on the LSE. So let's cross over to our London studios where Simon Pusey is one of our business correspondents is standing by to take us through this big day as voting starts in the European elections. Simon, good morning. It's good to have you on the program. Let's get this conversation started. Let's start on this front, the elections.
Yeah, so the elections is the main news here really today across the board. It's everyone's talking about, and the main thing really is that the Conservatives, the Labour parties, the main parties are really going to do really badly. A lot of people are thinking that the Brexit party, led by Nigel Farage, who is obviously one of the main drivers for Brexit, is going to clean up. They're going to get the main majority of the vote, and the Conservatives really could get their lowest vote ever. So all eyes on that. Voting is happening today for the next few days, and the results will come out on Sunday. It also is very influential on what will happen to Theresa May. Theresa May, the Prime Minister here, obviously, and whether she's going to hang around much longer. There's a lot of pressure on her. There was a resignation last night. A ministerial member resigned. And more could follow. So maybe Theresa May tomorrow, people are thinking she may be resigning herself. And I think the influence of the election and what happens in the election will really determine what happens to her.
Okay, elections on one hand and politics, then let's talk about the markets a bit. The London Stock Exchange shopping for more African companies to list. 115 companies already listed on the London Bourse, and that's worth several dozens of billions of dollars or pounds, to be more precise. So quite a big one. So how much more about this do we have? Would you be able to flesh up for us, Simon?
Yeah, so there are currently 115 African listings on the London Stock Exchange. Officials are looking to increase that number. They're visiting Nairobi and Luanda to try and partner with African exchanges. This follows similar initiatives in South Africa 2 months ago. There are plans to push into Africa in Ananjan and Cairo and Casablanca in the future. The National Oil Corporation of Kenya and Econet Wireless Zimbabwe Limited. These are just a few companies that have announced plans to list on the London Stock Exchange. The thinking behind this may be to try and diversify ahead of Brexit so that the exchange isn't relying so much on European investors, but mainly it seems to be the growth potential of so many companies around Africa. Many are at which the so-called budding stage. The LSE are hoping to help those companies deal with the potential scrutiny and questions that comes with being a publicly listed company. The LSE have also listed companies they describe as Africa's most inspirational and dynamic high-growth firms. In Nigeria, those are Afriland Properties, Alpha Mead Group, and ARM Life.
Great. But it's looking like a very troubled day for the equities market in London and elsewhere in Europe. Let's talk about your own market out of the city.
Yeah, you're right. Not looking good at all. Everything's sort of in the red today. The FTSE 100 is 37 points lower at 7,296 in early trading. Among the early movers are the supermarket group Morrisons, which is down 5%, and packaging company Smurfit Kappa, which is down 3%. The healthcare company NMC and pharmaceutical companies GlaxoSmithKline and AstraZeneca are leading the risers. The FTSE 250 index is also down 150 points at 19,099. for outsourcing company Serco, which has announced a share placing and a takeover of a US company, is leading the gainers, up 8%. It's worth mentioning, actually, the food industry here too. The food ingredients maker Tate & Lyle reported lower full-year pre-tax profits today and said earnings per share growth will be broadly flat for 2020. The company said statutory pre-tax profits fell 16% to £240 million for the year ended March 31st, weighed down by higher costs and a weak performance in its primary products business, which consists of high-volume sweeteners, industrial starches and fermentation products. Analysts expected report pre-tax profits of £292.4 million. The company reported an 11% drop in profit from primary products to £148 million. Meanwhile, another food company, a snow-free winter, helped pub and restaurant operator Mitchell & Butlers post a return to profit in the first half, but the company warned of limited visibility ahead due to Brexit uncertainty. They adjusted a profit rose by 10 million to 151 million, while revenue was up 5% to 1.8 billion as like-for-like sales increased 4.1% in the first half and down by 3.8% in the 33 weeks to May 18.
Quite robust from there. Thank you, Simon Pusey. We'll check in with you later in the day. We'll take a break. We're right back in 2, everyone.